Hello, and welcome to Monumental, where we sit down with entrepreneurs, leaders, visionaries, and big thinkers making monumental change. Here's your host, Evan Holiday.
Welcome to Monumental. I'm your host, Evan Holiday, and today we have on the show with us Mr. Jay Scott. Jay, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me, Evan.
Yes, really excited to have Jay on here today. He is full of knowledge and just so many different things we're going to be able to dive into today, and his experience throughout the years and many different ventures. So a little bit about Jay before we get started. He's an entrepreneur, investor, and the co-host of the BiggerPockets Business Podcast. And in the past 10 years, Jay and his wife have bought, built, rehabbed, sold, lent-on, and held over $70 million in property all over the country. And those range from single family all the way up to multifamily. Jay holds advisory roles in several companies and is the author of 4 books on real estate investing. And we'll put links to all those books in the show notes, but including the best-selling, the book on flipping houses. And with that, Jay, let's just dive right into a little bit of your background and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. So I guess we just talked a little bit about all the real estate that I do, but the funny thing is I don't consider myself a real estate guy. Most people in this industry who know me do, but I consider myself more of a business guy. And my background is I have an engineering degree. I have an MBA. I spent much of my career in the tech world. I worked at Microsoft for much of my career. And in 2008, my wife and I, who we worked together, we decided, let's get married. Let's start a family. And at the time, we were both working like 90-hour, 100-hour weeks. She was traveling literally 3.5 weeks a month. I was traveling a couple of weeks a month for my job.
Wow.
And we realized this just isn't sustainable. We want to start a family. We want to have a reasonable lifestyle, and just the working all the time just wouldn't cut it. So we quickly decided, hey, let's quit our jobs. Let's go do something that would allow us to have that freedom and that lifestyle and be able to put family first and work second. We had no idea what that was going to be. But we quit our jobs. We moved from the West Coast back to the East Coast, a little bit closer to family. We got married. We bought a house, and summer day in the middle of 2008, summer of 2008, my wife was watching a flip show on TV and said, hey, let's flip a house. And
Wow.
I honestly didn't think she was serious because I am the least handy person you'll ever meet. I'm an electrical engineer who can barely change a light bulb. But she was serious.
That's awesome.
She was serious. And I said, okay, well, we haven't quite figured out what that lifestyle business is going to be yet. So while we continue to think about it and figure it out, let's go do some real estate thing. And so hopped on the internet, did some research, bought a couple books, and 3 months later, we were flipping our first house. And 2 weeks after that, we were flipping our second house and our third and our fifth and our 10th. And before we knew it, we had flipped over 100 houses in a couple years. And we looked back
Wow.
a couple years later and we said, okay, I guess this is that lifestyle business that we were looking to build. Unfortunately, after the first couple of years, it wasn't really a lifestyle business. It ended up being another job, and it was a grind. And we were back to working 100-hour weeks. We were back to being stressed all the time, except now we're working weekends, and we're stressed because it's our own business. And so it took us a few years to really figure it all out. But once we had kids, it kind of forced us to figure out how to run our business like a business and how to structure our life in a way that would really allow us to put family first. So a lot of people look at us and say, wow, you had it figured out from the start. We didn't. It took time. It took effort. It took a lot of soul searching. But after a few years, we finally figured out how to basically run our real estate business and also put our family and our life ahead of that.
That's amazing. I love the fact that you and your wife took a leap of faith in yourself it sounded like without a true game plan or an action plan or what business you were even going to do.
Yeah, one of the great things about our relationship, and one of the things that I recommend to anybody, if you can find that person that will support you in whatever you do. And a lot of times we don't expect adversity in our lives. We don't We obviously don't want adversity, although it's obviously a good thing in some cases. But when you're in a relationship and you're with somebody, you're typically thinking, okay, life's going to be happy. Everything's going to be good. But most of us are going to face that adversity at some point. And I was extremely fortunate to find somebody, my wife, who basically said, look, if shit hits the fan, if things go wrong, if everything is horrible, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
As long as we're doing the right things for the right reason and putting our family first was the right reason, everything else we can figure out. And I talked to so many other investors and entrepreneurs who they find themselves in not as good of situations because they're with somebody who doesn't kind of give them that support, and they feel this pressure. And a lot of times it's self-manifested. A lot of times if you actually sit down and talk to your partner, they'll say to you, no, whatever happens, let's take some risks. And you don't expect that answer.
Yeah.
So what I found is having clear, good, open, honest conversations with your partner is the best way to give you the confidence to kind of go out there and just say,
Yeah.
we'll figure it out.
Yeah. I love that you share that. I could not agree with you more. I think that's a big learning lesson that I've learned over the last 6+ years that Jeanette, my fiance, and I have been together, and realizing that how important it is to have a partner that believes in you and believes in your work and believes in and has confidence in you. Because at the end of the day, if you're an entrepreneur or a business owner or want to take the leap to be an entrepreneur, or business owner, or investor, it takes belief in your from your partner in you and what you're doing. Because you if you have a happy, successful marriage or partnership, you should be doing things together and on the same footing and have that clear communication, like you mentioned. So I 100% agree. I think that's really important. And I think it was Charlie Munger, he mentioned, he's like, there's only a few big decisions in your life that are really important, and finding the right partner in that is one of them. And that's so important. That's such the direction of your life.
Absolutely. I mean, if you want to do big things, you need to be prepared to fail. And if you want to accomplish big things, you probably are going to fail at least several times in the meantime between starting out and actually getting there. And so many of us, and I fall into this category. I try not to, and I work every day to overcome it. But most of us fall into this category of we hate to fail because we think it makes us look weak, and we think that others around us are going to look down on us, and we think that it's going to just make us look. It's going to give an impression to other people that we don't want. But the reality is, if you don't ever put yourself in a position where you can massively fail, you'll also never put yourself in a position where you can massively succeed, because those are the same position. You can't massively succeed if you're not at risk of massive failure. And having somebody that will support you and basically say, great, let's do it. Let's take a risk. Let's risk like financial ruin, not necessarily financial ruin, but let's take big financial risks. Let's take big risks with our business. If you're not with somebody that can do that, well, it's unlikely that you're ever going to be massively successful, because you're not going to put yourself in that position where massive success or failure is an option.
Yeah, I love that. And speaking of massive failure and how that is part of the learning process, what do you think, how does somebody go about that? I mean, people don't want to fail, but I do agree that is part of the learning process. There's not failure, there's feedback, right? So how does somebody put themselves in a position to have massive failure or massive success?
Uh, I think part of it is being open and honest with those around you. Too many of us try to hide our failures. They try to pretend everything is going all right. And when they do that, then they actually have to hide it from themselves. And that stress builds up, and you start like trying to maintain a facade that's not real. And if you can just be open and honest about your failures, if you can come out and you can say to your friends and to your family and to strangers out on a podcast, hey, I have failed massively. It doesn't
Yeah.
mean that I am a failure. It means I did something and it didn't work out. I'll be the first to say, here, this is, I'm mentioning this for the first time on this podcast right now. I had a partnership that just went bad recently, and literally 3 of our businesses imploded. And last week I had to shut down 3 businesses, lost in the 6 figures. And it was a massive failure, and it stings. It's not just the money, it's the pride, it's all the hard work that went into it. But I need to own that. And I need to say, hey, I failed. And then I need to spend the next couple of months thinking about what happened, what caused me to fail, what am I going to do differently next time so that the odds of me succeeding are better. Because all the things that caused this failure, or those 3 failures, those business failures, can be avoided in the future. If I'm willing to be introspective, I'm willing to sit here and admit that I failed, admit that I made mistakes, and then say, okay, I'm not going to make those mistakes in the future, but I have to admit I made them in the first place, and I have to examine them and figure out how not to make them. And so for a lot of us, it's success is really as simple as examining our failures. And that's just 1 or 2 or 50 fewer mistakes we're going to make the next time. And if we fail the second time, well, we're going to learn another 50 or 100 mistakes we're not going to make. And eventually we'll have made most of the big mistakes, and success is pretty much preordained.
Yeah. It's awesome you share that. I appreciate you for sharing that, because I think that's good, authentic experiences that our listeners, need to know, that all of us face day in, day out in business and decision making. I like I shared last night with our affordable development mastery group. I've had partnerships too that have not gone well, that have gone sour, have gone south, and that's unfortunately part of business. But you can learn from that and say, hey, what did I do wrong? What could I have done better? And what will I make sure I do better? What systems or process will I put in place to make sure I can keep checks and balances on myself from falling into that same trap again? And that's the best part about failure, is you're like, hey, I know that I'm never going to do this again.
Exactly. But you have to admit it first, and you have to be willing to. So many of us, like, we'll fail at something and we just kind of compartmentalize it. We put it in the back of our head. We say, we're never going to think about that again. Just the opposite. Think about it, learn from it, spend time with it, get comfortable with it. My family, when we eat dinner at the dinner table, too often I find families get together and they talk about, okay, what happened in your day? What good things happened in your day? We talk about the failures. I want my kids to understand that it's okay to say, I made a lot of mistakes today. I did poorly on a test, or I had a fight with a friend and I made a mistake and did the wrong thing. And get comfortable with saying that, because I want them to grow up with that mindset that failure is something to celebrate. I failed, and therefore I can start over and I have more chance of doing it right the next time, as opposed to something we just compartmentalize and put away. So celebrate failure.
Yeah, that's great. Great example for your kids too. Just curious, how old are your kids right now?
10 and 11. They just turned 10 and just turned 11, 4th and 5th grade.
Nice. Yeah, I think that instills, confidence and self-knowledge at a young age, which is so important.
Absolutely.
And so we're talking about decision making. We're talking about failing and success. Can you dive into a little bit of how you've kind of found your own decision making process throughout all the different businesses and different ventures that you've been through?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, it's been very easy to, um, in our successes, some of our successes have been very easy because I'm the first to recognize that I'm an idiot. And the minute I recognized early on that I was an idiot, it forced me to surround myself with smart people. When we go into business, too often I see people go in and say, hey, nobody can do this better than I can. So I'm going to do the marketing. I'm going to do the acquisitions. I'm going to do the construction work. Then I'm going to market the property. And then I'm going to list it on the MLS. I'll take the pictures. I'll stage it. I'll negotiate it. I'll work with the inspector and the appraiser. And I can do all of that myself because I don't trust anybody else to do it as well as I can do these things. Luckily for me, I recognized early on that I'm probably not nearly as good at any of those things as other people, especially in the real estate world. There are a few things in this world that I'm good at, but most of them have nothing to do with the stuff that I've been successful at. And so in the real estate world, I learned early on, I can't do the renovation work. Like I said, I can barely change a light bulb. So from the very first flip, I was forced to hire it out. So many people say, okay, I'll paint my own house, or I know how to do plumbing. I'll save money doing plumbing. I couldn't do that. And what I've realized since is that not only should I not be doing that because I'm not good at it, but because it's not the highest and best use of my time. If I go out and I do my own painting on my house, but I could otherwise hire a painter at $25 an hour, I'm basically giving myself a $25 an hour job. Well, I left Silicon Valley making $150 an hour. I'm not leaving to start a business where I'm making $25 an hour. Not that there's anything wrong with making $25 an hour, but I have the ability to do things in my business that can make me more. I have the ability to focus on raising money. Raising money can literally make me millions of dollars a year because it allows me to do unlimited deals. I focus on acquisitions, finding projects. If I don't find a project, I make $0. If I find a project, I make a lot of money. So finding projects can literally make me thousands of dollars an hour return on the time I put in. So I focus my time in all of my businesses on those things that generate the highest return for me, assuming it's within my wheelhouse. There are certain things that could probably return a lot of money for me, but I'm not good at it. So I have to hire somebody else. But there are a few things I'm decent at. I'm decent at raising money. I'm decent at negotiating. I'm decent at finding a team to find deals and acquisitions team and running that team. So those are the things I focus on. And the nice thing about doing that is not only does it allow me to focus on the highest dollar per hour task, so I'm making the most money I can from that business, but it also frees me up to not do all the things I'm not good at and that aren't generating me a lot of income elsewhere. I'm not doing my own marketing. I'm not doing my own writing my own listings or taking my own pictures or doing my own renovations. So that frees me up to run that business. And then I have extra time where I can go start a second business. And if I can do the same thing there, where I focus my time on only the things I really like can move the needle on in that business, then I can go start a third and a fourth and a fifth business. And that's really the secret to being able to do lots of different things successfully. That's the secret of scaling, whether it's one business or 10 businesses. The secret to scaling is to figure out how to get out of your own way and put other people in a position that they can run the business for you so that you're not bottlenecked and you can go focus on the high level tasks and other things.
Yeah, that's all amazing. And guys, if you're listening right now and you're hearing this and you're saying, man, like, how can I do this? I mean, he's talking exactly about like being able to delegate and then empower, find your team, hire your team, build your team, or even if it's not in your company, if it's your partners, find people that complement what you're good at and they're good at what you're bad at. And Jay, like you said, what do you call it again? You're the stupidest one in the room, or
I'm an idiot. And
oh, the idiot. Yeah, that's what it was.
I'm the idiot. No, I am the first one to admit that any one role in my company can most likely be filled by somebody else who would do a better job at a reasonable rate. There are some things I'm really good at. My wife and I are really good negotiators. So we will never hire out the negotiation because that's a really high value task.
Exactly.
If I can on a multifamily, I mean, you know this better than I do. If I can get somebody down $100,000 on a multifamily deal in 2 days, even if I spent the full 2 days, let's say I spent 10 hours a day, 20 days, $100,000, I mean, or 20 hours, $100,000, that's $5,000 an hour.
Yeah.
So, I mean, negotiating can be a super high value task. So I might do that. I'm my own CEO because I'm really good at leading organizations. That's what I did in my previous life. But most of the individual contributor roles in my business, I'm going to be worse than 99% of the people that are in that industry that can do the job better than I can for a reasonable rate.
And how would you recommend our listeners get started down that path if they are the solopreneur or they're the sole person in their business? How would they go about that, starting that process?
So I'm a big fan of having as few employees as possible. I know after hearing everything I've just said, people probably assume that I have businesses with dozens or hundreds. No, I have as few full-time employees as possible. And I know a lot of people are terrified of hiring somebody full-time, and it's scary. The minute you hire somebody
Yeah.
full-time, you've taken on a responsibility for somebody's livelihood. You've now taken on responsibility for figuring out payroll and figuring out benefits and dealing with what happens when they get sick or they want to go on vacation. And it's difficult. And the first time I hired an employee for one of my own businesses, I was terrified and I second guessed that decision for a long time. And what I would tell people is take baby steps. So don't necessarily hire a full-time employee for a role where you don't need a full-time employee. We're in the real estate business. And in the real estate business, I'm going to make up a number. 80% of the jobs can be handled by a contractor. I mean, literally 80 or 90% of the things I do in my business, whether it's single family or multifamily or whatever, is dealt with by contractors, whether it's a real estate agent, an appraiser, an inspector, a mortgage broker, a closing agent, the people that are actually swinging the hammers on my jobs. They're all independent contractors, 1099s. So we're all accustomed to working with 1099s. Well, extend that a little bit. Hire a bookkeeper that's a 1099, somebody that's doing 2 or 3 hours a week. Hire an assistant, somebody that can come in and help you with paperwork as a 1099. Hire somebody that can manage your calendar. Hire somebody that, I mean, literally the first person I hired, their main goal, their main role was to call up and turn on and off utilities for me because I was flipping houses in Atlanta. We were doing several houses a month, and literally all the utility companies, for some reason, I would be on hold. I'd call and they'd say, "You are number 47 in line."
Yeah.
And so I'd be on hold, and my wife would say to me, "You literally spend 10 hours a week on hold with utility companies and other service providers, just turning things on and turning things off. Go hire somebody, hire an independent contractor, or hire a virtual assistant.
Yeah.
Hire somebody that can be in the Philippines or Mexico or wherever, because they can do a lot of that work. They can take a lot of that BS type work off your plate, the stuff that's not worth you doing, because you can pay somebody $7 or $8 or $10 an hour to do. Now, let's say you can't get by with a contractor or a virtual assistant. Well, find a part-time employee. Find somebody that has a job somewhere else, but is looking to fill 10 or 20 hours a week. Then you don't feel that internal pressure to have to make sure their family eats. And if you ever have to lay them off, you're not feeling like, okay, they're not going to have an income stream. So hire potentially a part-time person. Or fourth option, so you've got the 1099, you've got the virtual assistant, you've got the part-time person, bring in a partner. So bring in somebody, and I don't recommend partners lightly, but there are situations where bringing in an equity partner, somebody that actually shares the responsibilities and that can take a lot of that work off your hands, especially if they have skills you don't have, can do the same thing without you now having to hire a full-time person. So there are lots of alternatives to hiring full-time people that make it easier and less stressful for you, but solve the same problem that a full-time person might.
Yeah, I love that. And thank you for sharing that. And guys, that's honestly that's how we got started with Holiday Ventures. I mean, it started out with me and Janed. We did, our first hire was a full-time hire in the real estate side of things to help us work on deals. But then we did hire 1099 contractor on a part-time basis, 10, 20, 30 hours a week. And now that's springboarding into more positions, more roles, more work. It's literally, 10xing or compounding the amount of hours that we can do work and get stuff done. And it also frees up my calendar. Like you said, Jay, it frees up my calendar for high level activities, negotiating, sales, making political connections, or whatever the next step is to get a deal closed. That's where my mind is thinking. It's not like paying bills. It's not paying rent on the office. It's not, I'm not even thinking about that stuff anymore. And that's the power of it. I think that's one of the biggest things, is just clearing up your head so you don't have 100 different tasks that are low level tasks, like low value tasks on your time. And you can focus on the dark green tasks, the ones that really earn you the biggest ROI, like you said, the $5,000 an hour tasks.
Exactly. The things that nobody else is going to do as well as you are. going and networking with congressmen and congresswomen, going and lobbying the zoning department, going and talking to potential investors or partners or developers, people that are going to make or break your projects. These are things you can't really delegate, because anybody you might delegate to, well, they could just start a company and do the same thing you're doing.
Yeah.
So you're doing the things that literally nobody else can do without them being literally a competitor to you.
Yeah. And speaking of which, you have many different businesses, many different successful ventures. How have you been able to work successfully in many different avenues or spaces or types of investments?
So I'm a big believer of treating a business like a business. And it goes back to what I was saying before. I'm the biggest idiot in the room. I'm the dumbest guy in the room, except for when it comes to running the business. So in the real estate business, yeah, I'm the dumbest guy in the room when it comes to construction and it comes to marketing and it comes to sales, but I can run that real estate business. And I'm if I've never opened a restaurant, but if I were to open a restaurant, I've worked in restaurants. I wouldn't know how to cook. I probably wouldn't be a good waiter anymore. I probably couldn't be a cashier anymore. I wouldn't be good at that, but I could run the business. And it's that way in any business that I focus on. I don't pretend to know the day-to-day stuff. I focus on the one thing I'm good at, which is running the business. So when you say, hey, you do a lot of different things, actually, I only do one thing. I run the business. They're different businesses. And the people that work for me and that work in those businesses, they do a whole lot of different things. They have a very disparate set of expertises. But me, I'm good at one thing, and that's running the business. And so that is what I focus on. And regardless of whether I'm running my real estate business, I'm running my mold remediation business, I'm buying another business, I'm working with my partner. We invest in we have a stable of racehorses. I do some angel investing, and I work with a couple of angel investing funds. I'm the business guy in all of those things. And so my role is exactly the same in every single one of those businesses. And so it does seem like I'm doing a lot of different things, but I'm really just doing the same thing, just for a lot of different types of businesses.
And just to help clarify for our listeners, when you say running the business, do you mean the act of putting together the operations, the team, the vision? Is that what you mean when you say running the business?
It's different in different businesses based on what's needed. But for the most part, I create the framework. So here are the kind of the steps I see whenever I want to build and scale a business and then remove myself from the business, the things that I see needing to do, the top level things. One, again, I come from the corporate world. I worked for Microsoft for a long time. You walk into any big corporate type business and what do you see? You see departments, you see different groups of people that do different things. So if somebody's sitting at a desk, they're not both writing the code for the app and doing the marketing and dealing with inventory and supply chain management. No, if they're a developer, they're writing code. If they're a marketing person, they're in the marketing department. If they're a salesperson, they're in the sales department. If they're writing documentation, they're in the documentation department. If they're customer service, they're answering the phones. People specialize. So the first thing I like to do in any business, and again, this can be done in regardless of how big or small the business is. The first thing I like to do is I figure out what are those component parts? What are the divisions or the segments of the business that really need to be run and organized and scaled. And so I did this for my flipping business back in 2000. I mentioned that my flipping business was off the rails after the first couple of years, and we were working ridiculous hours and everything was out of control. And that was when I realized, hey, I need to organize. So I sat down with a to-do list and I said, here are all the to-do things I've done over the last couple of weeks. Let's try and organize them and see like what kind of falls out from here. And what I realized is every single task on my to-do list in my flipping business fell into one of four categories. It was either acquisitions related, it was rehab or renovation related, it was sales and marketing related, so getting rid of the properties, or it was raising money related. There was not a single thing on my to-do list not a single thing I did day to day that didn't fall into one of those four categories. So I said to myself, if I want to run this company like Microsoft or Google or whoever it is, what do I do? Well, I'm starting 4 divisions. Doesn't mean I need to hire 50 people in each of those divisions. I can run all 4 divisions if I want, but at least now I can start thinking about all 4 of those divisions separately. And I can put processes in place for each division. I can bring in the right contractors or part-time employees or virtual assistant or full-time employees or partners or whoever it is to manage each of those divisions. In my case, it was my wife and myself. So she took 2 of them. I took the other 2. I was good at the rehab and the raising money. She was good at the acquisition and the disposition, the sales and marketing. So she took those 2. I took my 2. And now suddenly we've divided and conquered. We've realized that we have 4 parts of the business. Now we could focus on organizing and scaling and making more efficient each of these 4 parts of the business. So the next thing we did is we started delegating. My wife said, okay, for the acquisition piece of the business, here are the people I'm going to bring in to help me. I'm going to bring in the wholesalers. I'm going to bring in the agents and the appraisers and the inspectors. I'm going to have somebody that can help with due diligence and put together budgets and schedules and all of those things. And then on the sales and marketing side, I'm going to have somebody that can take pictures and somebody that can stage and somebody that can list the house and somebody and a closing agent. And me on the rehab side, I'm going to deal with actually managing the budget and managing the schedules and managing the contractors and writing contracts and dealing with permits and all those things. And then the raising money, everything. So basically we divided and conquered. And I said, let's treat each of these 4 divisions the way a big company would. And let's start delegating out and bring in the right people and put them in charge. Again, doesn't have to be full-time people, but put people in charge. And then the next thing we realized was, okay, now we have people that are doing this work, but they were coming and going. So we had a project manager that we hired. The first project manager we hired worked for us for about 3 months. And I taught him the business. He knew nothing about real estate, but he was a good project manager type business. So literally for 3 months, we sat in a car, we drove around, I introduced him to the contractors. We went to Home Depot together. We worked on budgets together, schedules together, everything we did together for 3 months. 3 months later, he realized, oh, this business is easy. Why am I working for you? I can go do it myself. So what did I do? I went and I hired another project manager and I started that 3-month process over again. And it was the most heart-wrenching thing that after 3 months of my time, he just up and walked away and I was left with nothing. So this time I did the smart thing. And I said, part of your job responsibility as I train you for the next 3 months is I want you to document every single task. I want you to figure out how we're doing things and write checklists and manuals. And so that way in 3 months, if you decide you can go leave and compete with me, the next person I bring in, at least I have all the documentation. So I don't have to spend 3 months. And so we started doing that in all parts of our business. We had checklists for due diligence. We had checklists for budgets and schedules. We had checklists for inspectors, and we had checklists for every part of our business. And what we realized was at that point, we didn't care if somebody quit or if somebody new started, or if we had to hire somebody new. If somebody went on vacation and I had to take over their role and it was in my wife's division, I could take it over because I had the checklists. So doing checklists was a huge piece of really being able to scale. And so for us, it was a combination of segmenting the business appropriately, hiring for those segments appropriately, and creating the checklists and the documentation appropriately. Once we had all that, our businesses could basically run without us being involved day to day. We put somebody in charge of each of the divisions, or maybe one person in charge of all the divisions if it's a small business. And we say, here's the documentation, here are the people, here's the parts of the business, go do it, call us if there's a problem. And so for the most part, we've done that in every one of our businesses: segmented, documented, and delegated.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that story, and thank you for sharing that. I think I was very fortunate when we started Holiday Ventures in a similar fashion, where I kind of picked it up from a book, Traction, which I think is one of the foundational books of exactly what you're talking about, like creating the operating system for your business.
Yep.
And if you create that foundation literally from day one or wherever you are today, then over the course of implementing that over a year or a few months, it literally changes your business. You get accountability, you get direction, you get the ability for you to eventually step out of your business and start another business or retire, whatever you want to do. It just frees up your time and then your energy to do like we said earlier, it frees up your time and energy to do higher level things and higher value things. And that's the powerful thing about it, is like exactly what you're saying. Like we broke down for Holiday Ventures. We were like, well, let's think about how we can do the accountability chart, is what they call it in Traction. And you think about all the different divisions, and then you think about each position and what are the tasks within each position.
Yep.
And same for us. I mean, we have, really right now we have maybe 20 different tasks. And of that, we have a 5-person team. So we're filling 20 tasks or 20, quote unquote positions within 5 people. Eventually, maybe we'll have all 20 positions filled out full-time or part-time. But for now, we at least know what the overall structure of the business looks like. And we all have our set kind of domain or department that we're in charge of. And I think that's powerful, just having accountability for each department as well.
Absolutely. Here's something I like to get people to think about when somebody's starting a new business and they're doing it themselves and they're not ready to bring in anybody else and they don't know how to do that. I like to tell people, get your business to the point where you are making, on the time that you're spending, $100 an hour. And most of us, if we spend enough time and effort, we can build a business that's generating $100 an hour for us. It's work, but it's not impossible. And if you can do that, if you can build a business that's generating $100 an hour on your time, I guarantee you, you can find somebody really good that would be thrilled to do exactly what you're doing for $50 an hour. Go find that person, bring them in, pay them $50 an hour to do exactly what you were doing. They're now making $100,000 a year with zero risk. They're just running the business that you've created with the systems and processes that you put in place, and let them go take over the business at $50 an hour. You now have somebody running the business. They're making a good wage, and you're making $50 an hour to just go and do your next thing.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying you should necessarily do that. I mean, we want to build businesses a little bit more efficiently and scalable than that. But from a theoretical standpoint, that's basically what we do when we build a business. We get the business to X dollars an hour, where X is a high enough number that we can pay other people a portion of X, and we can keep the rest of it as our profit and step out and go do the next thing.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I think everybody write that down. Think about how you can get to $100 an hour and then be in a position to empower somebody who's willing to do exactly what you're doing for $50 an hour. That's a phenomenal example.
Or pay them $80 an hour. Great. Now you're only making $20 an hour not to have to do anything.
Yeah, exactly. Either way, it's a win.
Exactly.
So as far as I did want to touch on being the host of the BiggerPockets Business Podcast and co-hosting that with your wife.
Yeah.
How did that A, come about, and B, how did you guys decide to do that together?
Yeah. So BiggerPockets has their real estate podcast, and they have money podcast. And a couple of years ago, they approached me and they said, we'd love for you to do a podcast, to host a podcast. And I'm an introvert. It's funny. I can do these. You and I know each other, so this isn't too tough. But for me to like kind of talk to strangers all day is really difficult. So when they first came to me, I said, yeah, that's just not for me. And then my wife, after like a year of them asking, my wife was just like, I don't know why you don't want to do a podcast. That sounds like the most fun thing in the world. And she's an extrovert. She's a marketing person. She loves people. And I said, well, if you like it that much, why don't you ask them if you can go start a podcast? And she said, well, I don't want to do it by myself. She said, how about if we do it together? And I said, okay, let's do a podcast together. So I went back to BiggerPockets. And I said, here's the thing. They wanted me to do a flipping podcast because I've known for flipping house. And I said, look, I don't want to do a flipping podcast. There are a million flipping podcasts out there. And to be honest, I'm not the best guy for that podcast. Again, I'm not a real estate guy. I'm a business guy. And they said, okay, well, what podcast do you want to start? We'll give you any podcast you want. And I said, well, I just said, I'm a business guy. So why don't we have a business podcast? And real estate, running a real estate company, a lot of people don't think of it this way because they think of it as, I can do this on my own in my in my spare time. They don't think of it as a business, but real estate is a business just like any other. You have a product, that's the houses you buy and sell, or if you're buying and holding, it's the houses you buy and hold. You have to get inventory. So there's acquisition, there's supply chain, there's sales, there's marketing, there's working with customers. There's all the things that you have in a regular business. We just tend not to think about it in real estate because for some reason we address it a whole lot more loosely, a lot of us in real estate than real entrepreneurs. But we're real entrepreneurs. And if we can learn how to run our businesses more efficiently and scale our businesses more efficiently and do all the things that any other business owner has to do better, then we're going to be better real estate investors because we're going to run our real estate businesses better. So I said, let's start a business podcast. It's not going to be about real estate, but every principle, every person we talk to, every entrepreneur, every expert that we talk to, the principles that they teach us and talk about are going to apply to real estate investors and people that have real estate businesses. And so that way we can start educating real estate investors from a different angle. We can kind of trick them into getting good at business as opposed to just telling them to get good at business.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I love hearing that BiggerPockets wanted you to do it and you didn't want to do it. And it turns out your wife helped convince you. That's awesome.
Yeah, she's the brains and the beauty in our relationship.
Yeah, likewise. What the other question I was going to ask you? As far as your success writing books is amazing, and I would love for some of that knowledge of how that happened to rub off on myself and some of our listeners of you've sold, what is it, 250,000 plus copies by now of your 4 different books?
Yeah, I think it's over 300 now. So
wow.
Yeah,
that's mind blowing. I'm just curious how that came about, and kind of your success behind writing.
I give myself zero credit for those books. I have to give my wife credit for that. I'm a tremendous introvert. And again, talking to strangers is very difficult for me. Back in 2011, 12, after we had flipped 100 or so houses, I was writing a blog, and the blog got kind of popular because everybody was it was the worst time to be investing in real estate in history after 2008. So everybody was out of the industry and blogs were just becoming a thing. So I had like the only blog on the planet about flipping houses. And so anybody that wanted to learn about flipping houses found my blog. And so I started getting a lot of eyeballs and started getting a lot of emails and text messages, people that wanted to talk on the phone and ask me questions and take me to lunch and have coffee. And I love helping people, but I hate talking to strangers. I mean, it's just so hard for me. So I wanted to be able to help people, but it wears me out to have to talk and do lunches. So my wife said, well, you want to help people, but you don't want to talk to people. So why don't you figure out another medium? You like writing, you have the blog. Why don't you just take everything you know about flipping houses and write a book? And that way, when people say, hey, can I take you to lunch? You say, no, just go get the book. And it wasn't a way to make money. It was just literally a way to keep people to stop asking me to go to lunch. And so I sat down in 2011. It took about 2 years to write the book. But I said, I literally read every other book on flipping houses. And I said, what can I do better? What can I do differently? And all the other books that I read were they were rah-rah cheerleader type books, get you motivated, get you excited with a little bit of tactical stuff in there. It's changed since then, but back then it was really very little tactical stuff. And I said, I'm an engineer. I couldn't write the rah-rah stuff if I wanted to, but I bet you I could do a real good step-by-step manual that really teaches the nuts and bolts, more like a textbook than anything else. And so I sat down and I said, okay, how do I flip a house? And I wrote out the steps. And it was 20 steps to like doing that first deal. And I said, okay, great. 20 steps, 20 chapters. And so I wrote a 20 chapter book that's basically a step-by-step guide to doing your first flip. Chapter 14 or whatever it was on estimating rehab costs. And again, as an engineer, I was very methodical about how I structured my scopes of work and how I estimated my costs and created my schedules. So chapter 14 ended up being like 250 pages all by itself. And so I said, okay, well, that doesn't make any sense. So I'm going to split that into a separate book. So now I had a book on flipping houses and I had a book on estimating rehab costs. And I said, okay, I'm going to release those at the same time. I'm still friends with the founder of BiggerPockets, Josh Dorkin. And I said, look, I have these 2 books, don't know what to do with them. I'd love to get them out there. I don't care about really making a lot of money, but I would love to get them out there. And you've got a lot of people in your community. Why don't you publish it for me? And took him a couple of weeks to come around, but finally he said, okay, I'll publish the books for you. We came up with an agreement. He published the books and they just took off. And again, it wasn't something I planned. I wasn't doing it for the money. Literally, it was just here, just learn from it. And here we are 7 years later in BiggerPockets now. Those were the first two books of BiggerPockets Publishing, which is the largest real estate publishing company on the planet. And the books have done well. And it was purely serendipitous. It wasn't planned.
That's a really, really cool story. And yeah, I know where you're coming from, especially really the last year. It's amazing the amount of people that are reaching out, now that we've branded ourselves as the affordable housing development thought leader. You have tons of emails, tons of people reaching out, and I love helping people. And that's ultimately why the coaching program transpired. But now the next step is, in 2021, a big goal of mine is to write my first book, and it's going to be all about affordable housing development, because I get so, partially the same reason. I'm like, I want to help all these people, but I can't respond to every single email or question. So putting it in words is a great way to get it to the masses and they can get it for $10 to $15.
Yeah. And I just sat there and told a 5 or 10 minute story about myself and didn't really provide any value except talking about myself. So let me rephrase the last 10 minutes of what I said in a way that might actually be valuable. What I've learned from writing those books and putting them out there is it's a tremendously great way, whether it's books or videos or just going to lunch with people, writing blog posts, answering forum posts on BiggerPockets, whatever it is. Helping other people and communicating your knowledge to other people is a tremendous way to grow your brand, your business, and your success. By helping other people, you're building credibility. My books have given me the resources to do anything I want in this industry. I have people that are willing to give me money. I have people that are willing to partner with me. I have people that are willing to help me and coach me and mentor me. And it's absolutely tremendous. And my goal was never to get that. My goal was just to provide information. But from what I've learned is the more value you provide to people, the more it comes back to you. So what I would tell anybody out there is it doesn't matter if you don't have what it takes to write a book or you don't want to write a book. You're probably good at something and you're probably good at some form of communication. So take what you're good at, take that medium that you're good at communicating it and put it out there. And what you're going to find is it's going to naturally build your brand, build your ability to do whatever it is you want to do, and ultimately build your success.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. And I completely agree. I think, you don't necessarily need to write a book, but just sharing what you know in some form or fashion, some medium that you're comfortable and happy sharing with. I think that's a really powerful tool to grow your impact on others. And ultimately it comes back to you tenfold. That's the powerful thing about giving.
Absolutely.
Jay, there's many more things I'd love to go into, but let's save that for another podcast episode.
Okay.
Let's dive into our monumental questions.
Okay, let's do it.
What does success mean to you?
Success to me means having a happy family. So if my family is happy and everybody, obviously we can't always control health. But if every day my family wakes up and we are able to live a life, that makes us happy, we've been successful. And it doesn't necessarily rely on a lot of money. It doesn't matter where we live. It doesn't matter what we do. It's basically being grateful for what we have. And basically putting family first and knowing that whatever happens, we have each other. So for me, it's all about family.
That's awesome. What about daily habits or morning rituals that you have?
I am the wrong person to ask this question to. I know you probably get lots of people on the podcast who talk about, I get up at 4:00 in the morning and by 6 a.m. I've run 30 miles and I've written 7 chapters of my book. And I mean, unfortunately, the answer to my question is if I'm up before 7 o'clock, it's a really, really bad morning. I am a night owl.
That's good for everybody to hear though.
Yeah. And I'm a big believer. Again, it goes back to, we were talking before this episode started, we were talking about the fact that you've got to push your natural strengths and avoid your natural weaknesses, as opposed to doing what society might tell you that you're supposed to do. For me, I realized that I'm not a morning person. I've tried to do the get up at 5:30 in the morning. I've tried to do the go to bed at 8:30 at night. It doesn't work for me. I'm a night owl. I get my best work done between 8 and 2 a.m., 8 p.m. and 2 a.m. And that's what works for me. And I'm not ashamed of it. And I'm not going to try and change just because other people are bragging on Facebook that they get up at 3 a.m. and start their day.
Yeah, that's awesome. And like Coach T said, it's, oh shoot, I can't remember his name. Tony
Robbins.
Oh my goodness. How did I forget that? That was a brain fart. But yes, Tony Robbins, same exact thing. His zone of genius in the day is 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. And I think that's good news for people listening to this who are like, I'm not a morning person either. Because I think that's valuable to know your time.
I'm a big fan of try everything. Because who knows, maybe something will work for you that you didn't think was going to work for you. So I tried the whole getting up early. My wife, she's up at 4:30 every morning, but that's her natural cycle. And so do what works.
Yeah, exactly. And what about favorite book or book you are currently reading?
I knew you were going to ask that question. So I actually took it off my bookshelf. So it's a book called The Goal. It's written by a guy named Eliyahu Goldratt. It was written in the 80s, and I read this book at least once a year. The subtitle is The Theory of Constraints, and it's all about basically how to scale your business and make your business more efficient by identifying what the roadblocks are in your business, or what the biggest roadblock is in your business today, clearing that roadblock, and then figuring out what the next biggest roadblock is, and basically repeating and iterating on that clearing of roadblocks until your business is as efficient as you'd like it. And it's a tremendously good book. It's a bestseller, but for some reason, a lot of people have never heard of it.
Yeah. And like I told you before we got started, it's one of my favorite books as well. It's a parable, but yet it has so many lessons inside of it. And it's just a quick read because you want to know what happens.
Exactly.
Well, I love that. Thank you for sharing that, Jay. As far as where our listeners can follow you, reach out to you, connect with you, see what you're doing.
Yep. So I try and make it easy. If you go to www.connectwithjscott, just the letter J, .com, connectwithjscott.com. That links out to everywhere that I am and how to it's my email's on there if you want to get in touch with me. So anything you need, connectwithjscott.com.
I love it. And guys, there will be a link for that in the show notes as well. Jay, phenomenal episode. I love hearing about your background, the story behind the BiggerPockets Business Podcast with your wife, how you've been able to grow and scale multiple different diverse businesses and being able to build the business and be in the business. I think that's going to be massively valuable for all of our listeners today. So thank you for sharing that. And guys, if you enjoyed today's episode with Jay and myself, please make sure to share it on social media. Let others know you're listening. Share it with a friend, a family member who needs to hear this. And do not forget any reviews on iTunes or wherever you're listening do a tremendous amount to help us grow the audience and really grow the impact of Monumental. And guys, with that, have a monumental day.